I've been wondering, I don't know, about whether that was Miles' dad. So then it goes back to a flashback.
When Miles and Naomi are in the restaurant, she says it's time for his audition, and he's like, well, I don't really do that kind of stuff. And then she throws him a wad of cash, and he's like, okay.
Then there was a purchase order for an old plane, and then his name was Felix.
Yeah. And so then Naomi is kind of impressed, and she asks him, or talks about how she has an employer who would think she's going somewhere, and she'd like to bring him with her.
Yeah, I think she just says it's going to be an island.
And she's taking an expedition to an island. She's looking for, we need somebody to find a man who's very hard to locate, and there's a lot of dead bodies who he thinks that Miles can get the information to find out where this individual is located.
Yeah, and then Miles is like, well, finding a mass killer sounds very safe to me. But then she says that she'll pay him $1.6 million. And yeah, Miles definitely goes that way.
When do we leave?
Yeah.
Do we know what guy she's talking about that they want to find?
I thought it was Ben.
I think that's who it is, yeah.
Because that's who Keeney wanted.
Keeney?
The guy, the Navy SEALs guy.
So Widmore would want Ben. That makes sense.
The body that he read was the person who arranged the accident, the plane crash, the fake plane crash that Widmore set up to try to kind of cover up what had happened on the island. And that's pretty much what he said. We bring back the photographs and the papers and a person of the old plane. So it was that original flight.
Yeah, because we knew that there was that fake plane crash that they set up to make it look like everyone had been killed. But we didn't really know who had done it. We suspected Widmore, but now we know for sure it was him. So it goes back to the 70s, and Hurley, of course, wants to keep talking about Miles and his dad, and Miles doesn't want to, and Hurley's like, how weird is it that your dad's in all those movies? And he's like, how long have you known, or Miles, when did you realize this? And oh yeah, because he's like, did you know that your dad was here? And then he says, I knew the third day when I was in line behind my mom or something. And he's like, they're gonna get killed no matter what, so why should I bother doing anything about it?
Yeah, I think he followed his mother back to the house and saw her with him, and I think that's how he realized that was his father. At first, he didn't see him at the very beginning.
Yeah. Then it goes back to Jack and Linus, or Jack's in the school cleaning the chalkboard, and Linus comes in and he's all upset and says, what are you doing? I'm going to clean. And Jack's like, well, I didn't think you'd be able to clean in your state of mind. And Linus is like, what part that my son got shot or that someone kidnapped him? And then he's like, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to clean. And then Linus starts asking about Kate. And he's asking, how Jack knows her very well, and Jack's like, why? And Linus goes, well, she's been weird. She really cares about my kid, and it's creepy, and she keeps giving him blood and talking about how he's going to be okay. And he's like, I'm beginning to think she's got something to do with all this, and he wants to go report to Horace about her.
Yeah, and then Jack's like, well, I know this Kate girl, and she would never do anything to hurt him.
We're BFFs.
Yeah. And then I think that's like Roger's kind of thinking, well, maybe he has something to do with it too.
Because Jack seems to suddenly really care about it too. Yeah, so they all suck at hiding what's going on.
They go back out, and Chang has to go somewhere, go to the site where they're building the new hatch, right?
I guess it's the Swan station.
Yeah, the Swan, right? And it's kind of funny because Hurley's just dying to get at Miles, and he starts prodding Miles, just kind of like hitting him in the elbow. And he asks Dr. Chang, he says, what do you do on the island? And he says, well, it's classified, I can't tell you. He said, you can't even tell your wife. And he says, no, do you have any kids? And he says, well, I have a three-month-old son, and of course I can't tell him, he wouldn't understand. And he says, oh, you have a son, what's the son's name? He says, well, his name is Miles. And Hurley looks and says, wow, what a small world.
You both are named Miles.
Yeah. And then Hurley gets talking, says, by the way, do you happen to like jazz and like Miles Davis? And Chang says, well, my wife does, but I'm more partial to country. So then finally, what happens is they end up pulling up at the Swan House at the hatch, and Chang gets out and opens up the camouflage gates, and they go inside, and they're putting the serial number on the hatch part of it. It closes down, and the worker can't remember all the numbers, so the guy's reading them off to him. So what's that last number again? And Hurley looks at him and says, that last number is 42. Mm-hmm. And then Mom says, well, how'd you know that? And he says, well, that's the place where caused the plane to crash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back to a flashback, and it's really surprising because Miles is eating or something, and all of a sudden the van pulls up and drags him inside, and we are introduced to Brahm, or is that what I was?
Brahm, yeah.
Brahm, and he's like, we want to talk to you about not going with Nadia, because you shouldn't be working with Widmore. And
Naomi.
Naomi, right. You shouldn't be working with Naomi, and you don't want to get on that boat. And then he says, Miles, do you know what lies in the shadow of the statue? And then Miles is like, no. And he goes, then you're not ready to go. And if you come with us, you'll know who you are, and you'll know why you have your gift. And you can know more about your father. And Miles is like, well, I just care about money, so I'm not going to go. And you don't know me at all, because I don't even care about my dad. And Brahm's like, well, all the money in the world isn't going to fill that empty hole in your life. So he says, you're playing on the wrong team. And Miles is like, which one's that? And he's like, we're on the one that's going to win.
There's Early is still egging Miles. He's still giving him a hard time, and he says, you should really get to know your parents when you have the opportunity. He says, maybe if you go see your dad, he'll let you hold baby you, so let you change your own diaper. Miles just kind of goes ballistic on him and says, just quit. Mm-hmm. And says, I don't want to know my father because he abandoned me. And he said, and then he says, well, let's find out about you. Let's find out what you're up to. And so he grabs the book away from her and says, give me that back, give me that back. And he starts reading things in there, real strange writing, and all of a sudden we come to find out that the new Star Wars is being introduced soon, and he's going to write the sequel, Empire Strikes Back, and send it to George Lucas to have him do the script.
Yeah, with his own improvements.
I wonder what those improvements were.
Yeah.
And then Miles is like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And then Hurley's like, oh yeah, well at least I'm not afraid to talk to my dad. And then,
there we go, and we see Jack and Juliet and Sawyer together, and Jack is warning Sawyer that Ben's father thinks that Kate's involved, and he's like, well, her heart's in the right place, and Sawyer's like, well, where's her head? Mm-hmm. And he says, thanks for filling me in. And Sawyer goes outside, or he follows Jack outside, and then Phill walks up, and Phil's like, there's some developments on the, I don't know what it was.
He said, we know who took Ben.
We know who took Ben, yeah. And Sawyer's like, well, can that just wait? And he goes, no, because you took him. And then Sawyer's like, oh, well, let's go inside and talk about it. And then he punches him out and says, hey, Juliet, go get some rope.
Yeah.
And then it has another flashback, and it's Miles going back to see Mr. Gray, and he reveals to Mr. Gray that he wasn't really able to talk to his son. And Mr. Gray's like, well, why did you even tell me, Miles? Because it wouldn't have been fair to your son, because you should have just told him when he was still alive, which is really Miles being upset about his own father.
Yeah, so I guess he really does wish his dad would have been around, I guess. So
Yeah.
Not unlike what he says.
Yeah, he keeps denying that he doesn't care about his dad, but really he does. And then he goes back to the 70s, and Miles and Hurley are returning to the bus, and Hurley apologizes. He's like, sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, but I used to hate my dad too, and he left when I was 10. And the best thing that Hurley ever did was give his dad a second chance. And Miles was like, well, I was just a baby and I never knew him, and I don't want to. And Hurley's like, and then he goes in this whole like Star Wars.
That's how Luke was too.
And then the final scene shows Dr. Chang coming out of his, we see Miles looking at himself as a baby, which is weird. And Dr. Chang's reading to his son, little baby Miles, and then something comes up and he goes outside his house and he sees Miles, old Miles, and he's like, oh, I need you. And Miles is like, you do? And he's like, yeah, the scientists from Ann Arbor are here. So he follows Dr. Chang to the dock, and they're looking at all the scientists coming out of the submarine, and Faraday pops out, and Miles is like, Dan?
Long time no see.
Yeah, long time no see, Miles.
Yeah, long time no see.
And then it cuts to Lost.